Greetings. Today, my video will be on a somewhat different topic, and it's a review of a film titled Athena, which was released in the French language in September this year, just a month ago. I guess in September 18th or September 20th, and it's available in Netflix. I watched it in Netflix India, of course uh, English subtitles, with the aid of English subtitles, because my French is not sufficient enough to comprehend what characters are talking uh, in French, especially the French in its original accent as spoken by Frenchmen and French women, and not those Algerian animals. Anyway, forget. I hope those who are watching this video will patiently bear with me and don't hurl racial expletives at me and get outraged about how I vilify Maghrebi people from the Maghreb who are right now who live in France and whose lifestyle have been masterfully depicted. It's what I found to be. So let's come to the film. What I found to be totally astonishing was that uh, from the perspective of the state, from the perspective of the French state, this film, all the characters, especially those Maghrebian insurrectionists who fortify partially the Athena, that apartment complex, housing estate, and basically declare a kind of rebellion against the French state. And almost overwhelmingly of these people who engage in this kind of dastardly activity against France were primarily composed of Algerian, Moroccan, Tunisian uh, ethnic backgrounds. And yes, and one cop um, by the name of Jerome gets. I mean, these insurrectionists, these Maghrebian animals, they manage to capture him, take him captive, and he suffers some torture while in captivity. And even he, I mean, he ultimately, at the very end, he also apologized to one of the protagonists, main characters, about his brother's death, uh, due to, I mean, the cause of death was attributed to police brutality. Anyway, so the film, what I found utterly outrageous was that these people, and it depicts a reality which every Frenchman and women of European extraction face in their daily lives, especially Frenchmen and women of working class backgrounds who are forced to live alongside these animals, animals from the Maghreb. That what I found utterly outrageous was that these people, they seem to view themselves as the masters of France. They have no sense of inferiority, that they are living in another people's country. They are immigrants. They have no sense of that. They when the main leading character, uh, one of the brothers of the man who died, when he starts the insurrection in that housing estate, he feels that he has the authority to do so, and he commands authority among all these uh, people of color who live in the housing estate. And uh, he has no, I mean, he seems to be at ease while leading a racial and religious rebellion against the French state, in which he claims that since his brother was killed, since his brother died, so therefore he could legitimize his violence against the French state, totally forgetting that he himself and his brother and all his clansmen were basically immigrants, lowly immigrants from the Maghreb, who couldn't, who basically whose ancestors migrated to France, and even then they lived in ghettos, and they couldn't integrate in the sense, not in the sense of racial integration, that because that would be miscegenation, but who basically couldn't shed their hostility towards France. They couldn't. Uh, they failed to renounce Islam because this Islamic identity breeds resentment against Western civilization, wherever it might be, in Somalia, in Lebanon, in all these Maghrebian countries, in Senegal, everywhere. So wherever this strong Islamic Islamism uh, gathers strength, becomes a firmament, a force. It becomes a force of resentment. It becomes a force of violence, and its ultimate aim is to overturn Western civilization and place their own green uh, half moon insignia over Rome and conquer basically what Charles Martel had prevented, what the Spanish Reconquista undid. They have to they aim to reverse that. They're quite open about it. And this, I mean, what happened in France, these urban disturbances in those housing estates throughout France, especially in northern France, in 2005, those French riots, especially by these immigrants. It, it this film brings those events. Of course, it negatively portrays the state. The film's directors, they have taken every pains to portray these Maghrebian people in a positive light, and try, and it has been endeavored to, I mean, to per, portray their actions as a kind of legitimate insurrection against brutality unleashed by the French state against these hapless people, so-called hapless people, and so that's it. That's what I found, and the film is disgusting. Disgusting in this is not, of course, it has been masterfully, though, the scenes, those combat scenes, the helplessness of the police, and I also found the police to be somewhat multicultural. The police force, there were Africans, there were many Maghrebians also. One of the brothers of the protagonist was uh, another Maghrebian man, was also part of the police, and later he joins the insurrectionists. And too many times, the French far right, their names are invoked, and their, their hostility towards these immigrants, it is oftentimes invoked, but and as if the far right seem to be held responsible for these disturbances instead of these um, immigrants, disgruntled and hostile immigrants for the Maghreb. So I found, I mean, it's very painful to contemplate the daily sufferings, the daily humiliations, the daily travails of the average French person who, have to, who, who must have unlimited forbearance to bear on with these people. Because the ultimate aim of these people is to overthrow France by means of immigration, and once they partially achieve their aims, they would be in a position to negotiate with the French state on equal terms. And most importantly, the French state is a secular organization, it's a secular uh, entity, so it won't have any compunctions for while negotiating with Islamists. It's not a Christian state, it's not the French monarchy of Saint Louis, who unleashed crusades in the Levant, the 8th and 9th Crusade. I have a very interesting book I was reading. It's for those viewers who want to get a closer view. This is the title: Witnesses for Christ, Orthodox Christian Neo-Martyrs of the Ottoman period, 1437 to 1860. It's a biographical compilation of all the Christians of Orthodox dispensation who suffered martyrdom at the hands of the Ottoman Turks, the hands in throughout the Ottoman Empire, not just in Ottoman Greece, but throughout the Ottoman Empire, in Asia Minor, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Serbia, in Crete, in Cyprus, and all those Aegean islands. And it's this book. I mean, yeah, I mean the martyrs. They underwent tremendous sufferings and yet held steadfast unto the Christian faith. They never denied Christ. Many apostates to Christianity even came back and firmly re embraced their affirmation in Lord Jesus Christ as this. And they denounced Islam in front of their Islamic judges, like muftis and qadis and all those Ottoman ecclesiastical functionaries. So, and they were martyred. But the blood of the martyrs constitutes the seed of the church, as the great church father Tertullian had said. I mean, so uh, the Orthodox faith, the Christian faith survived, and today the Greeks have their own state carved out of the Ottoman Empire. Of course, I'm not going into the Treaty of Constantinople and the imposition of the Bavarian monarchy onto Greece, and how the great powers of Britain, France, and Russia played a very conspicuous role in the Greek War of Independence, especially in the naval battle of Navarino, which wrecked the Egyptian fleet of Ibrahim Pasha. Anyway, so coming back to the film, if the immigration conditions are not reversed, then this will be the condition. The French people might have to suffer the torments which were endured by these neo martyrs in Ottoman Greece. And the only aim, I mean, it's my opinion personally that these urban ghettos, these no-go zones, these urban tensions are carefully carefully planned, carefully executed, and their only aim is to overthrow the European order, the European Christian order. Since in the aftermath of the Second World War, the West has a very lukewarm attitude towards Christianity. Their open um, espousing of atheism, their secular values, so has emboldened these Maghrebian animals. I'm deliberately using the term animals, Maghrebian animals, to defy the French state openly. In 2020, when the French teacher Samuel Paty was even forget my pronunciation, even he was beheaded, decapitated by a Chechen emigrant, some Anzorov, whatever, and the complacent government of Putin allowed a grand funeral to be held in his homeland. That clearly depicts that how helpless are secular regimes in front of these emboldened Islamists. Imagine if somebody had, if let's say if some Muslim did something to a Frenchman or a Spaniard living along the southern coast, what would the French state have done in the 15th century or 16th century? That assailant's body would have been quartered, or crucifixion, or some other dreadful form of punishment. Today, such people are fed. Such people are not just fed, they are housed in prisons, fed comfortably, given lenient sentences, and such people thrive in prison, even in the French, even in the Islamism thrives in French prisons, and they make converts among native French prisoners. So the danger has reached epic proportions, and it's incumbent on the French people and and the French state to overcome this evil, because it's evil. Whatever political terminology, sociological terminology may be used to describe the grievances of these people, it's an insurrection on the same. It's a religion-inspired insurrection, and the hostility has religious sources, religious and racial sources, both religious hatred, envy, and perhaps contempt for European civilization. That's why even these third generation immigrants, they seem to be they seem to have embraced more fervent, they seem to rather espouse more fervent jihadist sentiments than their ancestors. And there's some concrete facts which never ought to be forgotten. And when the French government under Charles de Gaulle, according to the Evian agreement, when France abandoned French Algeria in 1962, 61, 62, I forgot the exact year, all the Pied Noirs had to leave Algeria, and all those European colonists who had settled in France after France conquered that region in 1830, despite living in Algeria for more than a century, they had to return back to France. But all these Maghreb peoples who were living in France were not repatriated back to Algeria. The term harki has become a term of abuse and contempt for those Algerians who um, served in the French army and participated in suppressing the Algerian disturbances when Algeria was still considered to be a part of France. So the Pied Noirs had to return. I mean, of course, today in today's multicultural worldview, that might be considered bigotry. The the inbred racial supremacist attitudes which was cherished by the Pied Noirs, and their refusal to live with the Muslims, the Maghrebian people, the Algerians. That might be the worldview of today's multicultural discourse, emanating from academia, also from the churches of different denominations. But the Pied Noirs had very little choice, and we must appreciate their decision, because they were given the choice of the suitcase or the grave. Either they had to leave Algeria after it became an independent state, or they had to die at the hands of the jihadists. The Algerian War was a jihad against Western civilization. And despite being a war hero, Charles de Gaulle he also had premonitions about about the real nature of this Algerian so-called freedom struggle. I mean, that's why he was reluctant to grant them, reluctant regarding the question of assimilation. Anyway, today, uh, the release of such films is also a symbol of a greater malaise which afflicts Europe, especially Western Europe, about these domesticated, about these domiciled, hostile populations living in their midst, and their supremacist religious views and their jihadist sentiments, which and their only goal seems to be the conquest, military conquest. Such films, uh, if viewed from a proper perspective, can offer cogent sociological analyses about what remedies ought to be adopted to eliminate such kind of threats. And these, and of course, re-education, reaffirmation of republican values, such things are nonsense. And when such things are embraced as a part of public policy by governments, different governments of Western Europe, the jihadists, these Maghrebian people, especially in the context of France, they they sense the weakness that that despite perpetrating all kinds of murders, violence, riots, the government's response seems to be, puerile, even cowardly, perhaps. So let's pray to God that this jihadist menace is countered, and all these Maghrebian animals, along with their European collaborators and all those native French people who have apostatized, who have embraced this creed of Islam, are forever banished from the land of the eldest daughter of the church. With these words, I end this video. That's it. Thanks for watching.